have reported symptoms of a common mental health disorder like depression, anxiety and bipolar. 25 years ago, that figure was just under a quarter. And those people are also more likely to be out of work than their peers who don't have mental health conditions. So let's look at the impact on the workplace in particular, both on employers and employees, with Sir Charlie Mayfield, former chairman of John Lewis, who also led the government's Keep Britain Working review, joins us in the studio. So Charlie, good morning.
Good morning, Anna.
Before we get into the detail of this, I thought that point that Wes Streeting made was interesting. He said it was a divisive view. He said he had this enthusiastic agreement and visceral disagreement. Was that something that you found when you did your review?
I'm not a politician, so I think I probably get a slightly different experience, but I can totally see why you'd see that kind of reaction, because on the one hand, you're going to have people who have got conditions and are feeling that the suggestion that even they might be accused of being overdiagnosed is deeply offensive. But on the other hand, I think you have a lot of other people who would feel that there probably is an overdiagnosis problem.
And who are these other people, Sir Charlie Mayfield? Brexit gammon. People who've been to work and they want everybody else to go to work.
So I think it's the fact it's divisive, the fact it's a bit controversial is, to my mind, a very good reason why we do need to be talking about this, and we do need to be discussing how we make it better. And I think the diagnosis issue and the fact that the review is being commissioned into it is probably a pretty good response to that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really difficult, and the reason we're talking about it this morning actually, one of the difficult paths to tread is in the workplace, because you have people who have a right to go to work, to be supported while you're there, but you also have businesses, particularly small businesses, who can struggle under the weight of making certain accommodations. So how do we negotiate that push-pull?
Well, I think this is very much what we've been looking at within the review that I led. The fact is that I've almost yet to meet an employer who's not concerned about mental health issues, particularly amongst young people.
I bet they're not concerned, Mr. Charlie Mayfield, because it affects productivity. It affects profits.
So this is, almost whatever the diagnosis issue is, this is an issue which is manifesting itself for employers right now. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to an employer the other day. I won't name them, but they're a very large employer of apprentices, and they were saying that, and I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands, of apprentices each year, and they were saying that they've seen a marked shift in the course of the last 5-6 years from a position where they had very few issues with anxiety and anxiousness, etc., to one now where about a third of their intake basically are starting with some form of early stage mental health issue. Now, these are going to be very ill people who've got onto those programs, so this is a real issue, and of course that employer is dealing with it. They're saying, okay, so this is what we've got in front of us, we need to deal with that.
I'll stop you there, Mr. Charlie Mayfield. The language that you use is very important. This is what we've got in front of us. You've got a young human being in front of you, not this. Employees are not things, Mr. Charlie Mayfield.
Support these people, get them through that, and actually very often what people will become is far more resilient as a result of going through difficult issues. So
oh, this word again, resilience. Resilience.
I think the notion that people have a manifestation of mental health is not a lifetime, in many cases not a lifetime thing. It's something you have to help people through, and employers are really well placed to do that, in fact.
So the employers that you're talking to, is it more a scaling up of things that are already in place, or actually for some of them is there something brand new that they're now thinking, right, we need to work out how to deal with this?
It's both. So I think on the first instance, probably it's worth saying that you have to deal with this. So I think there is almost a danger when we talk.
Here we go again. You have to deal with this. This what, Mr. Charlie Mayfield? This what?
Talk about overdiagnosis, that there's almost an implication this isn't really real, and therefore there's perhaps a tendency to think therefore I shouldn't have to deal with this. I don't agree with that. I do think there is a real issue which employers do need to address, and when employers do that, they find that actually they can make quite a big difference with relatively simple interventions. I mean, it's about about creating a supportive working environment. It's about recognising that the person in front of you, probably does need to be. You need to be clear with them about what the requirements are. You may have to be a bit more thoughtful about if they're finding something difficult, more difficult than you perhaps think they should. You can't sort of wish that person to be somebody different. You've got to deal with who's in front of you. And
Ooh, you can't wish for somebody different. You have to deal with what's in front of you. Oh.
lean in. And if you do that, you can actually get some great results. I mean, fundamentally, performance in an organisation is a function of creating the conditions where all the people in it are able to perform well. So you've got to deal with who you've got.
You talked about resilience, and I mentioned those figures at the very start, how the number of young people, specifically aged between 18 and 24, who've reported symptoms of a common mental health disorder has gone up quite a lot in the last few years. And I suppose it's really difficult to know. It's really difficult to know whether that is people's mental health generally getting worse, or whether it's that people are more tuned in as to what good and bad mental health is because we're talking about it more, or whether our resilience is slipping because you look back at times gone by, decades gone by, times of war, where people weren't talking about mental health, but presumably it did have an impact on people's lives. It's sort of hard to work out where and what and why, really, isn't it?
It is, but I think there's, if we unpick it a bit, there's a few things. I mean, first of all, there has been a marked increase in the incidence of mental health issues in young people, but that began back in about 2014. So I think there is a rising tide of diagnosable mental health issues amongst young people. You then have this question as to whether how much of that rising tide is sort of due to overdiagnosis or due to a real incidence, and that's a very difficult thing to unpick. But I think that's why I think the review that West Streeting's announced is helpful, because some serious qualified people are going to have a hard look at that question, which I think is a good thing. But I think when it comes to the young people themselves, I mean, I've met several young people who have told me they've got this and this and this and this and this, various different conditions.
They've got this and this and this and this. They're human beings, Sir Charlie Mayfield. They haven't got this, this and this and this, and it doesn't matter what your super qualified psychologist might say.
And they're incredibly articulate about it. I have to tell you, they haven't struck me as lacking any kind of resilience. Actually, they're just very clear about what they need to perform. Now, I suspect that for some employers, they will find that quite demanding because they're sort of expected to respond to that. But I also suspect that if you look back in history, most generations, it probably have intergenerational pressures like that, where I would imagine that, 25 years ago, people were saying that the current lot of people coming into the workforce are more demanding, or they don't do the things that we used to do 20 years previously. So I think we've got to sort of unpick this a bit, and I think therefore, a review like the one that's been announced is helpful because that unpicks a piece of it. I do think, we need to make sure that employers recognise they've got to deal with what's in front of them. There's a lot they can do, and one of the things we're going to do on the review is help to people to understand that, and also put in place better support to enable people to support people with who've got early stage mental health issues.
Yeah, on that point, what does that review need to produce in order to be genuinely useful for everybody? Obviously, people will look at it. There'll be numbers, there'll be findings, but how can that actually become something that makes things better for everybody, particularly in the workplace?
So, I mean, in brief, everybody's got to do a bit more, basically. So employers do need to play a role. I mean, that they have to be on the pitch in terms of sort of really taking a frontline role in helping their people to deal with the mental health issues that they show up to work with. Pretending anything different is wrong, and employers have got a unique opportunity actually to do things early that can make huge differences. They can be the difference between whether somebody develops a full-blown issue or not. So they have a critical role to play, and we'll be essentially getting into what are the practicalities of how you do that and how you create the right mechanisms to support and enable them to do it. Quickly, it's worth saying that we need to think also about line managers, because actually it's difficult sometimes to deal with mental health. You can't expect line managers to be able to understand every single situation that they're facing, so you have to support them just as much as you do actually employees. Employees have a role to play because there is lots of evidence to say that actually being in work is both positive and protective of your mental health. And the truth is that work's not always easy. You have good days and you have bad days, but you kind of have to push through the bad days to get to the good ones. And also you do develop, part of your development in employment is prospects, both mental health-wise and in terms of their progression. And then the government obviously has a key role to play. I mean, I think the government absolutely is responsible for thinking about issues like diagnosis and some of the system issues, but also, down the track, what we said in the review, the government's going to have a key role to play in making sure that we got the incentive systems and all of those systems lined up in the right way that encourages employers to do what they need to do, employees to do what they need to do, all within a system which is supportive of positive outcomes.
Sir Charlie Mayfield, always really interesting to get your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Okay, my take on Sir Charlie Mayfield's corporate speak. I mean, that was 10, nearly 11 minutes worth of talking about employers and employees and what we've got in front of us. The human being is reduced to an item of productivity. The line manager has to tiptoe, has to walk on eggshells over somebody who's suspected of being overdiagnosed. I mean, in a civilized society, what is somebody with ADHD or autism even doing in a corporate workplace like that? In a civilized society, there should be a universal basic income to cushion such people. Because if a neurotypical has got no clue what a neurodivergent is going through, even the fact of walking across the threshold of a office, a factory, a call centre, a production line, that is enough to induce a meltdown. So Charlie Mayfield, very successful man, head of John Lewis, called in by the BBC. We're all corporate chaps together, and we need to talk about what's in front of us. What's in front of us is a human being. You say 2014, but the presentation of your overdiagnosed young people have been presenting since the COVID lockdown. You haven't even addressed the mental health damage that the COVID lockdown has done. What did these Tory buffoons like Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Matt Hancock, they have been lined up to answer for their actions, but they haven't been asked about the long-term impact on the young people of Great Britain. And I feel, as an anti-work warrior, as somebody who's been fighting the system and is now getting a bit long in the tooth, I feel that it's my responsibility to speak up against these corporate lackeys who are chivvying us all along. Look, just whatever your problem is, whatever your diagnosis is, you've got this, and this. But our review will find out that you're going to have to return to basically the Victorian workhouse because you are a unit of productivity. Without you, the United Kingdom's economy cannot flourish. So despite your mental health, you still have to show up to work. You have to do what we require of you in return for money, and money that will pay your bills and allow you 48 hours of freedom. Freedom is the word that we haven't talked about. William Wallace's freedom! Because you won't get freedom in work. Your plastic sandwich, your Tesco meal deal at your desk. Oh yes, that's freedom, all right. Come on, let's fight back against these corporate employment fascists, these employment fetishists. Come and become an anti-work warrior. The future needs you.